Welcome to the second workshop for the fall semester. This one is on Linux distributions and virtual machines. I'll preface this by saying I'm not at all an expert on Linux distributions. I learned a lot for this presentation, but I am kind of excited about it. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me at any time. But I guess let's get started. So first I wanted to start with just like a little bit of a background behind where Linux comes from. So in the late 1960s, Bell Labs started developing Unix, which stands for Uniplexed Information and Computing Service. It was sort of based on an early operating system called Multics, which is where the name comes from. And Unix was designed to be a smaller scale operating system to replace Multics. And this was coming from a time when computers were the size of rooms and they weren't very accessible to the general public. So Unix was a kernel-based operating system, and I'll cover what that means in just a second. So hang on with that information. Unix was the first portable operating system, meaning that it was written in C, and so it can operate on a lot of different platforms, not just the big computers that you see in those really old photos. Main goals for Unix were using plain text for storing data, treating everything like a file. So it's not necessarily saying that everything is a file, but it's just treating things like processes and other bits of information like streams of bytes that are exposed through this file system. So file abstraction and storing files in a hierarchy kind of improves accessibility in the operating system. And Unix was intended as a language for programmers developing software. It kind of spread in academic circles and then expanded into commercial spaces. And because it was closed source, a lot of companies started making their own versions, and that caused some compatibility issues down the road. So then following the development of Unix was GNU, and that was started in the early 1980s by Richard Stallman, and we're not going to go into him too much, but the point was to create a completely free software operating system as opposed to Unix, which was still kind of inaccessible to the general public because it was closed source. But Stallman wanted to create a technical means to a social end, where with this free software operating system, the users could view source code, they could modify it, they could distribute it freely, learn from it, that sort of thing. It was completely independent of Unix, but it was designed as an alternative to Unix. And fun fact, GNU is not Unix. So that's a little bit of a fun acronym there. Which leads us to the Linux kernel. And again, if anybody has any questions, you can stop me at any time. If you haven't taken 333 yet, which is programming at the hardware software interface, I think that one, at least when I took it with Phipps, he does cover the kernel and Linux just a little bit. So you have that to look forward to. So that leads us to the Linux kernel, which was developed in the early 1990s by Linus Torvalds. And this was like a side project. It wasn't intended to be anything special at the time. It's a complete clone of Unix with POSIX compatibility, and POSIX is the IEEE standard for IEEE standards for compatibility between operating systems. So the Linux kernel that was developed dealt with kernel level programming, which the kernel is the part of the lowest level core component of the operating system. So this is access to all memory and interaction between the hardware and the software. A lot of driver software is done at the kernel level. So with kernel level programming, security is a big priority. And actually, let me share my screen here so you can sort of see what we got going on here. So this is my copy of Virtualbox. I've got a couple different images over here. They're all powered down. But you can, when you set up each individual image, you specify how much of the how much is going to be allocated for the machine. And so, I mean, I've got a couple here. I mean, this one has a lot more space allocated than this one here. But it is, you do get to have that sort of customization to sort of fit your needs. And in terms of system resources, I lost my train of thought, sorry. In terms of system resources, if you're just looking to set up like a basic image of a distribution just to sort of play around with it, you wouldn't think that you're going to use it as your main operating system, or that you're doing anything too heavy on it. You can totally just make something super small, and that'll be sufficient. And actually, let me, if you have a Linux distribution installed, you can also access it from your terminal or your command prompt. If you have Windows, you can use Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is another option. So you don't necessarily have to access it through a virtual machine. It's just one way of doing it. That'll get you the graphical interface. But in terms of virtual machines, I will walk through setting one up so that you can see what it looks like. If you have these installed, you're welcome to follow along. But let me just pull up my instructions here. You'll at least get to see what that looks like. So I'm going to be using Ubuntu 20.04. That one's the most recent long-term support edition, so it's the most stable. So when creating a virtual machine, you just give it a name. Let's call it a workshop. Why not? You can specify which type of operating system it is. We're going to be using Linux in the version as well. There's actually a couple in here. But we're just going to use, let's try making Gen 2, actually. No.
Are you typing on the screen now or not?
Oh, sorry, you can't see that? Sorry. Let me change that, thank you. Oh, well. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so see that. Okay.
That we could see that pop
Oh,
up.
okay, you can see the pop-up.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
You're good.
Awesome. All right, so let's just call it workshop. And you can change where it's going to be. We're going to make this one Ubuntu just because I haven't tried setting up a different type of distribution. And I think you also have to have it downloaded, which I only have Ubuntu. So we're going to stick to what we know. You get to choose the size of the memory that you want to allocate. Again, minimum it looks like about 1024 there. So let's just call that. I can do math in my head. 2048 there. Super small, but it will suffice. So we are going to create a virtual hard disk if you're following along. But this is just creating it's the abstraction layer that I was talking about with the virtualization method of a virtual machine, I guess. Sort of just using the same resources. And then you just, if you're following along, you want the disk image. And you don't have to know exactly what all of these mean. We want to dynamically allocate our hard disk file. So this is good if you're using multiple operating systems. You know, like you just want to try and play around with Linux here. If you dynamically allocate the hard disk file, it'll only use up as much as you actually need. So it'll save you a little bit of space there. And then let's just say 10 gigabytes is fine. So those are kind of the minimum there. So let's see if this works. I hope so. So then in order to just turn on our virtual machine, you just hit start. And I hope this works. Does anybody have any questions about virtual machines or Linux distribution so far? We got plenty of time here to answer some questions as well. It'll take a little bit for our computer to set up.
I was gonna say I know I tried to start mine and it just it says the kernel driver is not installed, but I think that might just be something on my end.
Gotcha.
Quick question: do you know how to actually delete virtual machines? Like if you wanted to? I don't have too much to do on.
Yeah. So like if you have multiple, right? Like this one where I have different versions of a distribution image just sort of sitting there. Is that sort of like what you mean? Like these are all different images that I have been playing around with. In order to delete it, it's really easy. You just sort of click remove. Let's try with this one because I know this one doesn't work anymore. Not really sure why. So then, if you want to just delete the whole thing, you just hit remove and then delete all files. I didn't really have anything on that, so I didn't have to worry about it. But you don't want to delete your files unnecessarily. So it's just going to take a minute or two to set up here. But with the Linux kernel that I was telling you about, it with kernel level programming, that's what controls the drivers. So that's how you're able to use the same keyboard and the same mouse. Like if you're in this area, well, it's got the loading screen right now, but while you're in this window, your mouse and your keyboard will be controlling that virtual machine. It's kind of interesting. And also something to note, your host key with your distribution is different. When you're using a virtual machine, you can set it to be a different key. But this is like the equivalence of like the Windows key, or I forget what they call it for the Mac. But yeah, basically just like the Windows key. So if you wanted to like access like escape and stuff like that, you would have to hit in this case, the host key is the right control. So it's just something you have to keep in mind. It's a little different on a Linux machine. If you're interested in using Linux or starting to develop on it, and you want to get a little more serious with it, you could do things like get like a cheap Chromebook or something like that. And well, maybe not a Chromebook. I don't know if Chromebooks work because they don't really have internal storage, but you can always just get a cheap laptop and then install Linux on that and play around with it. And actually, you can install Ubuntu on your Raspberry Pi if you've got one of those. Those are fun to play around with, because you can basically make your own computer with, and we're still loading. You can basically make your own computer with a Pi if you've never gotten to play around with one of those. So it's another fun thing to do. And there is a way to make this full screen. It has to do with the, that's a cute little jingle. It has to do with the optical disc. I know that or the optical drive, and I know that there's a way to make it full screen, but I don't remember how to do that. So we're just gonna stick with a smaller box for now. If anybody's interested in more on Linux, we could possibly hold another workshop showing how to use the virtual machine or how to use the bash shell. So definitely, if you're interested in that, let us know. That would be fun. So you can try Ubuntu without installing it sort of like alongside your regular operating system if you want to. But if you're just looking to install like the virtual machine, you can just hit install. It won't erase or like make any changes to your current operating system. It'll just sort of create the image, so you don't have to worry about that. Then you just choose your language. You choose the Dvorak keyboard if you're a spicy programmer. I actually enabled the English Dvorak keyboard layout as an alternative layout for my keyboard. Sometimes I'll accidentally hit it and then start typing nonsense. So that's always fun. Definitely makes me panic for a second, but Dvorak is popular with programmers if you're interested in spicing things up a little bit. So you can choose just the normal installation. This will come with everything that's like normally packaged with Ubuntu for your operating system if you want the full experience. But if you're just looking to sort of play around with Linux, you can choose a minimal installation. And the way waiting game is always fun. I will say that once you create the virtual machine, you do have to restart your computer in order to use it. So that is a little unfortunate, but it's definitely fun to play around with. I'm kind of curious how many people are actually following along. Totally don't have to, but I think it's fun. So if you are following along, this is the scary question. Definitely scared me the first time I was setting up the virtual machine, but it's okay to you're gonna choose erase disk and install Ubuntu, because you're not actually, as of right now, you're not actually accessing your computer's disk. You're accessing the in the last step where we allocated the resources for the distribution. That's where we actually sort of created the virtual optical disk. So you're not actually erasing your computer's contents if you choose this. So you would select that option if you're following along. It's a very heavy question. Do you want to erase your disk? And then that's fine. You write the changes to the disk. And then you can just choose your location or wherever you are. I'm not actually sure how they use that information. It might just be for like time and stuff like that. You totally can't tell what my password is either. So that was very good password, very strong password. Welcome to Ubuntu. So this is sort of their little loading screen, talks you through some of the hardware or the stuff that is included. You can access a lot of the same software that you can on like a Windows or Mac operating system on your Linux distribution. Like if you use Notepad++ or Firefox. I'm not sure if Chrome is available on Linux, but Spotify is. That's cool. But yeah, Ubuntu is a very very resource heavy, but it's definitely good for beginners if you just feel like dissenting from Windows or Mac. But I mean, all this software that is sort of bundled with these distributions is all free software. It's all open source. You can have fun with it, really, if you wanted to. Oh, it does support Chromium, I guess. And this is gonna take a while, but it does have its own free Office suite. I don't know if you've used that, but it's actually pretty close to Word if you're interested. And it's also free, so. But yeah, like I said, if you end up taking or haven't taken 333 yet, at least when I took it, it goes into the kernel space a little bit, and it talks about how, more specifically about how software interacts with the hardware. So that's kind of cool. I don't think I'm actually gonna stick around and wait for this to finish unless it magically decides to finish right now. We'll see. But you can, if you want to close, I won't actually do this. I'll wait for this to finish installing. But in order to sort of close out of your virtual machine, if you've got it running, you just hit close. It'll just power it down. A lot of this up here is just, more specific information if you want to customize your virtual machine. You can access some of the drivers right here. But yeah, I think this is pretty cool. Definitely learned a lot during the presentation. Every time Ubuntu releases a new long-term support, they pick a new mascot. So this one for 20.04 is the fossa, which I'm not really sure what the fossa is, but I think I have a picture back here somewhere. Oh, there it is. It's that thing, I guess. I think for 14, the LTS edition for the 14th sort of like edition is like a unicorn or something like that. Useless Ubuntu facts. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know. You can totally, if you're interested in using a virtual machine, like I said, you can install it on an external drive and still use it with a virtual machine as long as you've got the virtual machine manager installed on your device. Oh, okay.
I see
someone
question like crazy.
Yeah,
yes.
Someone that
question. She's in the chat though.
Can you?
Okay, gotcha.
You want me to read it? I could read it.
Oh. Oh, I actually missed a lot of these comments. I apologize, friends.
No, don't go back up. No, just read the comments.
Too late. Too late. Oh yes, Temple OS. Classic.
Hello.
Yes. So so yes, you can install Debian package. Like I said, Ubuntu is based off of Debian. It kind of builds on it, and it's so it's a little more like a standard operating system. Sorry, Momo. Let me answer your question because that wasn't actually a question.
Oh, never mind. All right.
What projects would you use Ubuntu for? You can use Ubuntu for anything really. Like you can just use it as you would a main computer. I mean, if you're looking to, Linux is popular with development and cybersecurity as well because it's like I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, which actually I can switch screens here and show you.
Oh, I tried using a Linux terminal before. I can only still use it, but it's not fun at all. Like, there's no actual user interface, so it's like all terminal, and then you have to just type in lines after lines. So I did not enjoy that.
That's how you gotta learn, dude.
That's the same thing too.
Understandable.
The same thing.
You gotta swallow that pill.
Yes.
Oh, no.
So with the Linux kernel, wait, let me think about what your question is. So you can use Linux for anything. I mean, I sort of talked about this, but with the kernel operating system, or the kernel part of the operating system, it has to be super secure. So you can do some fun stuff with ethical hacking, only ethical hacking. If you're interested in cybersecurity or I'm assuming informatics or general IT. It's popular with servers. If you're interested in server stuff. But yeah, you can just use it as a regular operating system. I mean, you can download Notepad++ and just go ham on it. I would recommend it if you're looking for just like peak customization. I mean, with Windows and Mac, you get a lot of bloatware, but with like Linux, and I know I mentioned Gentoo specifically, that one where you have to really specify exactly what you want to be included in your distribution package. It allows you to really customize exactly what you want, and it's also free. So yeah, open source. Does that sort of answer your question, I guess? Oh, there's a lot of comments. I appreciate everyone's input, because like I said at the very beginning, I'm not an expert on Linux at all. I don't even use Linux on a daily basis. I've just sort of started playing around with virtual machines and speedrun desert. But yeah, I mean, if you have Linux installed, like any Linux distribution installed on your computer, you can use it from the terminal. It's not particularly pretty. It is efficient if you learn the commands, but I am not particularly well versed in that, and so I'm not very fast. But personally, I really enjoy pulling up my command line if I'm like sitting in like a lecture hall or something, because then it just makes me feel like I'm a smart programmer or something. I don't know. That's just me. Like hacker mode or something. I don't know. But yeah, if you're looking to get started, I would recommend like Debian or Fedora. Those are a little smaller than, a little less complicated. Well, not complicated. Not that Ubuntu is complicated. But yeah, sorry I missed all that in the chat there. But that's pretty much what I wanted to cover with this very lightweight introduction to Linux distribution. My virtual machine is still painfully installing. It's supposedly close. Well, anyways, theoretically, this is what it could look like on your machine if you are using a virtual machine to run your Linux distribution on top of another operating system. It doesn't look like they're using Virtualbox though, so it's a little different. But you can use it just like you would like a regular computer on a computer, so that's kind of fun, I think. I did not know that you could install a GUI for Windows Subsystem for Linux. I honestly, when I'm using Linux distributions, Oh, okay, cool. It came with version 2. I honestly don't really use Linux that much at all, so I'm not really sure why I thought I was qualified to give this presentation. I just think they're neat. But it's a fun little afternoon project if you want to dip your toes in Linux. Is anybody still like interested in hearing me talk about this? Because I kind of covered what I wanted to cover. I mean, we'll see if I can get this virtual machine to run. I still got you here. Do we have any questions?
Do you know anything about emulation? So I know you were talking about that before.
Yes. So, run hello OS. I don't have either of those installed, honestly. Just basic, as for, oh, you did post the ISOs, okay. Sorry, to answer your question about the emulation, virtual machine. Excellent question. Thank you for, your attention to details. I'm a little scared. I'm not gonna lie. But anyways, let me stop sharing my screen for a second.
Don't be scared.
I saw James's presentation on Temple OS. Anyways,
there was a presentation on Temple OS. Damn.
Well,
This
yeah,
is your
just
word,
briefly.
okay?
I missed that.
Fair enough. It was, yeah, basic, as far as I understand it, the creator of Temple OS was not entirely, he had a few marbles loose by the end of the creation. But anyways, I can definitely multitask here.
Search book now.
Okay, wait. Emulation, virtual machines. So, thank you for telling me that my screen is sharing. You'll see all the, my gallery of memes. Anyways, emulation, virtual machines. So those rely on using hardware to trying to not use the word emulate. It sort of makes the operating system, so like, you know, Windows or whatever, it makes it emulate. Oh shoot! It makes it sort of mimic Linux and so it's actually a little more secure than thank you for reposting Temple OS. I'm trying to run it right now actually. Questionable. Wait, I can definitely multitask. See, I feel like if I had a virtual machine for my brain, I would not be using my resources very wisely. So with emulation, they usually rely on like you can use like a flash drive or like floppy disk, and that's got the image on it. They're not as easy to set up, but they are more secure than the virtualization, as far as I'm aware.
Like emulation's used a lot for like whatchamacallit, like Dolphin. If you guys like to play games, like Desmume, or I've never is it pronounced Desmume? Am I pronouncing it wrong? or is it like DSM? Yeah, it's DSMU or something. But yeah, I always wondered, I guess, why it was emulation rather than something else for games. But I don't know. I'd have to search that up probably.
Interesting. I've not heard of that. Where is Temple? Let's Google it. I do not know how to use this. I am curious though. To see if we can set up Temple OS. It's a biblical themed lightweight operating system.
We
according to
absolutely
Wiki.
want Temple OS.
According to this website on Temple OS, for those of you who missed the presentation, and I quote,
want an OS? Why would he need one?
We can't get into the lore right now. It's too deep. The lore is too deep for the scope of this discussion.
Freaking God, that's Windows.
Oh, wait.
He hated using Windows.
Temple. Virtual hard disk, I guess. Following some instructions, because this is a funky. Wait, I don't think I did that right. It's a funky kind of operating system. Let's try this. Oh. According to this website here, he was struck by a train and died in 2018. R.I.P. Carrie A. Davis.
Rest in peace.
This article calls Temple OS outsider art.
That's like an improbable, like unfortunate state of events. Like that's sad.
Yeah.
I do love the I guess the icon for it. I wonder if this is actually the icon for it, right? With the sword.
Yeah, that's the actual icon.
That is a cool icon. If I saw that and I was like a kid, I'd be like, this is amazing. Like this is gonna be cool.
Oh, this is actually interesting.
You should just be able to boot it right off the disk.
Okay.
Temple OS was written in a programming language.
ISO.
He developed his own programming language for it too.
Yeah, Holy C. It's actually the best programming language.
Originally called C++, later renamed to Holy C.
Oh, so there is.
Yep.
Oh no!
Yep.
Yo, Holy C Workshop, let's go!
I will unironically host the Holy C Workshop.
Let's
Call
go.
Call me
There we
up.
go, guys.
Yo, if you
Please
don't,
do, but also if you want to get started with not outrageously sized Linux distributions, Temple OS might be right up your alley with a beefy 16.5.
That's insanely small compared to the rest.
Small but mighty.
Yeah, I
What
feel
was
like
it
I'm
about?
watching I'm watching
Daniel?
you know. This is really fun.
I think I remember something from Bible camp. Oh, this is fancy. Oh, this is getting spicy.
It works. It's beautiful.
wait, James, you made this or no?
Let me find it really quick.
OS share dot.
Oh, it's called Distro Watch. If you're ever interested in putting the fun back into computing,
That's a good pitch.
It was fun at one point?
well, it was and now it's not, and that's why you need to put the fun back into computing. Use Linux, BSD. BSD is something.
Berkeley standard distribution, right?
Berkeley software distribution. Something like that. But basically it will tell you all of the raving opinions on the major Linux distributions. And,
I've never seen this before.
yeah.
Type possibly on there.
If you guys wanted to see what Ubuntu 14 looked like, I think it was a mistake.
Oh, there it is.
Anyways,
You guys
this is
Frankenstein
what
that out of context.
the logo for Ubuntu 14 looked like, which looks a lot like Rainbow Dash or something. I feel like it's not the right choice for a logo. What is a FOSSA?
What?
Let's find out. A FOSSA, which is the current logo.
Okay.
The current
A small cougar. Very fun.
A small cougar.
Small cougar.
Damn, it's really small.
Where's the cougar? Maybe
The
it should
latest
have
the mongoose family.
screen up.
That was kind of it for the workshop. Thank you guys for coming. Do you have any questions about Linux distributions or virtual machines? Thanks for coming, guys. This was a lot of fun, actually. And if you guys have any follow-up questions, definitely hit my DMs. If you want to see like more about the Linux shell, well, it's not a shell, but like Bash. If you want to do Linux command line, let me know.
What's the difference
I
between
guess.
a shell and
I don't. Oh, you know, actually, that's a great question. Let's pull out my presentation. So,
Between the shell and bash?
well,
Just-
the
is that the
shell
question?
gives the command processor interface and control with text commands, and also utilities like file management. The Linux kernel itself is just the kernel is the part of the operating system that handles the hardware software interface. So, or whatever. You know what I mean.
So you're saying I could run something like Bash on my shell? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Bash is a shell.
I wish it was different.
So like, I guess like if you pull up command line or terminal and you go to Windows WSL or like Ubuntu or something like that, you can do that. And like we did that for like the KDD cup and stuff. So that's like running the virtual machine, except not virtual machine, I guess.
I see.
I'd have to research that. But we can cover that if anybody's interested in more on Linux. But yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming, guys. Very fun workshop. We'll post that on YouTube soon, I guess. Yeah, and that's a wrap for tonight. Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
Have
Emily.
a good night.
Ryan.
And before we leave, just announcements for the week.
Yes, Tony.
So we've
Ooh,
got
yes.
so tomorrow we've got my workshop, which is going to be how to get a job in tech. So definitely be sure to come out to that. And
How
on
unfortunate.
Friday,
I would
unfortunate.
love a job in tech.
What's
I have a class.
oof? Well, there'll be
think I have
YouTube
work.
recording.
But I might just-
No job for you.
And Friday we have side project development night,
Actually, but-
and that's it.